Have you ever found yourself praying while lying down and right afterward felt a weight in your heart, as if you had done something wrong? Maybe that question seems simple, even ordinary, but it reveals a spiritual conflict that many sincere Christians carry in silence. There is an idea that for God to hear us, we must be in the right position, in the right place, in the right way. And when we are not on our knees, when we are too tired lying in bed, guilt begins to rise. But does God measure prayer by the position of the body or by the truth of the heart? Is he offended by our physical weakness, or does he draw even closer when he finds us vulnerable? In the light of Scripture, this is a question that deserves to be faced with honesty, without haste and without ready-made answers, especially when we talk about prayers whispered during the watches of the night, when the body rests, but the soul remains awake before God. Father, today I acknowledge before you a silent guilt that has often tried to hide in my heart. How many times have I spoken to you while lying down, and then immediately wondered if I had done something wrong, as if you were more attentive to the position of my body than to the truth of what I was feeling? But you search the depths of my being, as Psalm 139:1 says, and you know my thoughts even before they are formed. For that, I thank you, because nothing in me is hidden from you. On nights of extreme exhaustion, when the body asks for rest, but the soul still needs to speak, guilt tried to silence my prayer. It felt as if, because I was not kneeling, my gratitude was weaker, my words less worthy. Yet today I give thanks because you are not a God who accuses, but a God who welcomes. Romans 8:1 reminds me that there is no condemnation for those who are in you, not even in the way they pray. You know the weight of my nights, the tiredness that follows me to bed, and still you remain near. You do not turn away when I am weak. You draw closer, as Psalm 34:18 declares. And while my body rests, something within me begins to move, opening space to understand that this guilt may be revealing something deeper you want to heal in my heart. Father, you know the questions that live inside me even before I find the words to express them. How many times have I wondered if there was a right way to speak to you, as if prayer depended on an invisible protocol? This doubt about posture almost made me believe that I needed to align my body in order to reach heaven. Yet your word assures me in Jeremiah 29:13 that when I seek you with all my heart, you allow yourself to be found. There were moments when I compared the way I pray with the way others pray. Some kneel, some raise their hands, some pray out loud, and I, lying there in silence, simply thinking of you. That comparison almost stole my gratitude. But you gently teach me that there is no spiritual choreography that impresses you. There is only a willing heart. As Jesus taught in Matthew 6:6, prayer happens in the secret place, where only you see. Today I rest in the truth that you are not measuring my posture, but my intention. Whether standing, sitting, or lying down, you remain attentive. Even when I speak to you at the end of the day, tired and quiet, you still listen. And as this understanding settles in my heart, it begins to open space to see that posture was never meant to be the center of prayer. Lord, I thank you, because you have never confused appearance with truth. Many times I tried to align my body while my heart was out of place, thinking that this would somehow make up for what was missing inside me. Yet you teach me patiently that prayer flows from within, not from the outside. As 1 Samuel 16:7 says, people look at the outward appearance, but you look at the heart, and that changes everything. There were days when my body was positioned just right, knees bent, hands folded, yet my mind wandered far away, trapped in worries and distractions. Then there were nights when I was lying down, exhausted, but my heart was fully surrendered, grateful simply to be alive. In those quiet moments, I felt peace. I learned that a heart turned toward you matters far more than a body arranged to look spiritual. This understanding brings rest to my soul. I no longer feel pressured to perform, but invited to be real. Teach me to align body and heart when possible, but never to sacrifice sincerity for form. And as this truth settles deeper within me, it gently leads me to recognize how easily form can replace essence if I am not attentive. Lord, I recognize how easy it is to turn prayer into a habit done without presence. Sometimes I spoke to you more out of obligation than out of desire, mistaking repetition for connection. Your word awakens me in Isaiah 29:13, reminding me that lips can draw near while the heart remains far. I am grateful that you call me back before routine replaces relationship. There were moments when I repeated well-organized words, thinking that structure alone would please you, while my heart rushed ahead to the next task. You gently show me that you are not impressed by formulas, you respond to sincerity. As Ecclesiastes 5:2 teaches, fewer words spoken with truth are better than many words spoken without awareness. Teach me never to hide behind spiritual habits. Let every word I offer, spoken in strength or whispered in weakness, carry intention. I do not want prayer to become empty tradition, but living dialogue. And as I grow in this understanding, I begin to see how even sacred practices must always be guided by purpose rather than performance. There is something deeply meaningful in the gestures that have been passed down through generations of faith. Kneeling, bowing the head, lifting the hands, each of these actions speaks without words. Lord, I recognize that these postures were never empty. They were created as expressions of humility and reverence before you. As Psalm 95:6 invites us, there is beauty in bowing down and acknowledging who you are. I have learned that the body also learns how to pray. When I kneel, something within me quiets. When I lower my head, I remember my limits. When I lift my hands, I express dependence. These gestures can help the heart align with what it longs to say. I honor them for the meaning they carry, not for the appearance they create. Yet I am also learning that symbols are bridges, not destinations. They point toward you, but they cannot replace the encounter itself. When the gesture remains, but the meaning fades, something inside needs to be realigned. And this awareness gently prepares my heart to look beyond form and discover how Scripture consistently leads me back to inner devotion. Lord, when I remember Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, my heart is filled with reverence. That was not a moment of formality, but of complete surrender. Scripture tells us in Luke 22:41 that he knelt and prayed in deep anguish. What moves me most is not the posture itself, but the weight he carried in his heart. Prayer there was not performance. It was honesty before the Father. Jesus did not hide his distress. He expressed fear, pain, and obedience all at once. Sweat like drops of blood reveals how intense that moment was. This teaches me that prayer is the place where I do not need to mask my emotions. Even the Son, in his humanity, brought everything before you. That truth frees me from pretending to be strong when I am struggling inside. As I reflect on Jesus praying in the night, I learn that prayer is not about appearing composed, but about being real. It is possible to ask for relief and still choose trust. And as this example settles in my heart, it opens my eyes to see how God has always listened to prayers offered far beyond formal settings. Lord, over time I have learned that prayer is not about completing a task, but about nurturing a relationship. You never invited me into a cold religion, but into a living communion. Revelation 3:20 reminds me that you stand at the door and knock, desiring closeness and fellowship. Prayer, then, is no longer an obligation. It becomes shared life. In a true relationship, words do not need to be rehearsed. There is room for silence, for tears, for spontaneous gratitude. So it is with you. Some days I speak freely. Other days I simply rest in your presence, and you remain the same, faithful, attentive, near. You measure connection not by eloquence but by sincerity. This understanding reshapes how I approach every moment with you. I no longer wait for the perfect time or place. I can speak to you while walking, working, or lying down at the end of the day. This living relationship weaves through ordinary life, growing deeper with each honest encounter. And as it does, I begin to recognize how Scripture consistently affirms this freedom to approach you at any time. There is a verse that speaks to me in a deeply personal way because it reveals a God who meets us in the quiet moments of the night. When I remember you on my bed, I meditate on you in the watches of the night. Psalm 63:6. Lord, this truth shows me that remembering you is not confined to temples, altars, or specific postures. It rises from within when everything grows still and the soul begins to speak. David wrote these words in a season of scarcity, far from comfort, likely exhausted. Yet even as his body rested, his thoughts turned toward you. This teaches me that gratitude does not require strength, it requires awareness. Sometimes, remembering you before falling asleep is already an act of faith. A simple acknowledgement of your presence can carry more weight than many carefully structured prayers. This verse gives me permission to see my bed as a place of encounter. Not a place of distraction, but of remembrance. There I can replay the day, give thanks for unseen protection, and rest in your faithfulness. And as the night deepens and silence surrounds me, something within me begins to open, preparing my heart to understand prayer that is born in stillness. There is something sacred about the hours when most of the world is asleep. The night quiets external noise and amplifies what lives inside the heart. Lord, I recognize that during the watches of the night, you draw near in a different way, more intimate, more personal. Psalm 119:148 speaks of eyes staying awake to meditate on your word, reminding me that wakefulness is not always random. Sometimes it is an invitation. There were nights when rest escaped me and my thoughts raced without direction. Over time, I learned that these moments can become conversations with you. Instead of fighting the silence, I can breathe deeply, thank you for the day, and place my worries in your hands, one by one. As Philippians 4:6-7 teaches, when I bring everything to you, peace begins to guard my heart. You do not sleep when I am awake. You are not distant when I feel restless or confused. You lean in and listen. The night is not punishment, it is opportunity. And as I begin to see it this way, I realize that you reveal yourself not only in crowded gatherings, but also in quiet rooms where intimacy is formed in silence. Lord, there is something deeply freeing in remembering that some of the most powerful prayers in Scripture were not spoken inside a temple. David cried out to you in the wilderness, far from comfort, far from religious structure, surrounded by uncertainty. Psalm 63:1 reveals that it was in the desert that his soul thirsted for you. This shows me that your presence is not confined to sacred buildings, but meets us wherever we truly seek you. In the wilderness, there is no audience and no appearance to maintain. It is just the heart and God. Many times, my own life has felt like that place, without clear answers, without stability, only the need to trust. And it is there that prayer becomes raw and real. No rituals, no performance, just dependence. You did not withdraw from David in that place, and you do not withdraw from me either. This truth reshapes everything. If you heard David in the wilderness, you hear me in my room, on my bed, in the quiet of the night. I do not need to wait for the perfect environment or a holy setting. Your presence follows me wherever I am. And as this truth settles in my heart, I begin to recognize that you continue to listen even when prayer happens far from what people consider sacred. Lord, over time I have learned to trust that you are not limited by the environments I consider appropriate. You do not require a setting, a schedule, or formality to listen. Some of my most honest prayers happened far from any religious context, while driving, in the quiet of my room, lying down after a heavy day. Your word confirms this in Jeremiah 33:3, where you invite me simply to call, with the promise that you will answer. It is comforting to realize that you are not bound to places, but attentive to intention. There were days when I could not open a Bible, but I could open my heart. Days when I could not form complete sentences, but offered you broken thoughts, sighs, and simple gratitude. And even then, peace came. This reminds me that you understand the language of the soul, even when words are incomplete. This truth lifts an invisible burden from my shoulders. I do not need to arrive prepared to speak with you. I can come as I am. And the more I embrace this freedom, the more I see that it is not spiritual carelessness, but an invitation to live a faith that breathes through every circumstance of life. Lord, there is a deep freedom in understanding that prayer is not limited to specific moments of the day. When Paul writes, "Pray without ceasing," in 1 Thessalonians 5:17, he is not describing something impossible, but a constant awareness of your presence. I see now that my entire life can become prayer, even in the simplest and most ordinary moments. Praying in all circumstances does not mean speaking non-stop, but staying connected. It is gratitude while preparing a meal, trust while walking through a busy day, surrender before falling asleep. There were seasons when I could not stop for a long prayer, yet my heart stayed turned toward you throughout the day, and that changed everything. Your presence fills the spaces between words. This understanding brings prayer down from an unreachable pedestal and places it into daily life. It stops being a single event and becomes a rhythm. In joyful moments, gratitude flows. In heavy moments, quiet cries rise. And within this steady rhythm, I begin to realize that what matters most to you is not the length of my prayers, but the consistency of my surrender. Lord, there is a deep sense of rest when I understand that you are not measuring prayer by the position of my body, but by the direction of my heart. You have never been impressed by outward gestures when they are empty inside. Your word makes this clear in Proverbs 21:2, reminding me that while a way may seem right to a person, you weigh the heart. That truth changes how I come before you. There were moments when my body looked disciplined and reverent, yet my heart was distant, distracted, or rushed. And there were nights when I lay down exhausted, with no strength left. But my heart was open, honest, and fully turned toward you. In those quiet moments, peace came. I learned that sincerity reaches you faster than any posture ever could. This understanding frees me from fear and pressure. I can rest my body without abandoning faith. I can speak in silence and still be heard. As my heart aligns with yours, I begin to see that something sacred happens when the soul surrenders, even when the body can do nothing more than remain still, available, and trusting. Lord, the night has a way of revealing what the day tries to hide. When everything grows quiet, the soul finds its voice. I recognize that you are not limited to daylight. You walk with me even when darkness comes. Psalm 42:8 reminds me that during the day you grant your mercy, and at night your song is with me. This truth transforms the night into a place of encounter. There are nights when the body rests, but the heart revisits decisions, wounds, and hopes. Instead of running from these moments, I am learning to bring them to you. Sometimes all it takes is to thank you for what was overcome during the day and trust you with what still feels unresolved. Choosing a few simple reasons for gratitude before sleep can gently shift the atmosphere of the soul. You walk with me on this unseen ground of the night. You are not startled by restless thoughts or interrupted prayers. You sanctify these moments. And as I recognize this, I begin to understand that nighttime vulnerability prepares the heart for deeper healing, opening the way for trust to grow where fear once lived. Lord, there are days when strength simply runs out. The body feels heavy, the mind slows down, and the soul can barely whisper. In those moments, I am reminded that you do not demand energy when what I have is weakness. Instead, you draw near. Your word says in 2 Corinthians 12:9 that your power is made perfect in weakness, and that truth reshapes how I see my limits. There were times when I tried to pray with beautiful words, but all that came out was a quiet request for rest. And I discovered that you did not reject that prayer. You welcomed it. Sometimes acknowledging my fragility is itself an act of faith. Admitting that I cannot carry everything alone opens space for your strength to work within me. You never asked me to perform spiritually when I am exhausted. You offer rest. Jesus invited the weary and burdened to come to him in Matthew 11:28, and that invitation still stands. As I accept it, I begin to see that weakness is not the end of prayer. It is often the very place where prayer becomes most real. Lord, there is a deep relief in realizing that I do not need to appear spiritual in order to be heard by you. You never asked for polished prayers, but for truth. Jesus made this clear when he said that true worshippers worship in spirit and in truth, John 4:23. That teaches me that prayer does not need to sound impressive, it needs to be real. For a long time, I confused formality with reverence. I thought that carefully chosen words and rigid structure proved spiritual maturity. Yet I began to notice that while the form looked perfect, my heart was often far away. In contrast, there were moments when my words were simple, even disorganized, but your presence felt close and undeniable. That is when I learned that authenticity opens doors that formality never can. You are not uncomfortable with my humanity. I can laugh, cry, question, give thanks, or remain silent before you. I do not need to hide doubts or polish emotions. And as this freedom grows inside me, I begin to discern how excessive formality can quietly become a barrier, rather than a bridge to real communion with you. Lord, I am grateful for voices that help translate faith into real life. C.S. Lewis was one of those voices. He never treated prayer as something idealized or distant from human experience. Instead, he showed that speaking with you involves raw honesty. His reflections echo the invitation of Psalm 62:8, which calls us to pour out our hearts before God without pretense. Lewis understood that you do not desire polished words that hide what is truly happening inside us. He valued a confused but sincere prayer more than a perfect speech spoken without presence. That truth brings relief to my soul, because it reminds me that I do not need to organize every thought before coming to you. I can arrive with mixed emotions, unanswered questions, and imperfect gratitude, knowing that you welcome me as I am. This perspective removes the pressure to pray correctly. Sincerity becomes the shortest path to you. When masks fall, something aligns within me. And this honest way of approaching you reveals that prayer is not theory or abstraction, but a direct encounter with a God who is attentive, present, and near. God, when I pause and speak with you, I realize that prayer is not a mental exercise. It is a real encounter. I am not speaking into emptiness, nor sending words into the air. I am standing before a living God who is attentive and near. Psalm 104:18 declares that the Lord is close to all who call on him in truth, and that gives weight and meaning to every word that rises from my heart. There are moments when I feel nothing extraordinary, no strong emotion, no tears, no visible signs. And still, you are there, present, faithful. Prayer does not depend on what I feel, but on who you are. When I speak to you while lying down, quietly before sleep, I am not less connected to heaven. I am simply speaking to a Father who never leaves, even when my senses are tired. As this truth settles within me, prayer shifts from effort to connection. It becomes contact with what is real, eternal, and constant. You walk with me through the night. And the more I recognize this nearness, the more I begin to see how subtle traps appear when the heart seeks to prove spirituality instead of living in true dependence. Lord, as I walk with you, I begin to notice how pride can hide even within attitudes that appear deeply spiritual. At times, insisting on certain postures, words, or rituals does not come from love, but from a desire to feel that I am doing everything right. Your word warns me in Proverbs 16:18 that pride comes before a fall, even spiritual pride, the kind that disguises itself as devotion. There are moments when kneeling, speaking eloquently, or following a rigid routine feeds the ego more than faith. Not because these practices are wrong, but because the heart can lean on them to feel superior or more accepted. You know when my actions flow from reverence and when they flow from vanity. That awareness leads me to ask for discernment, so I do not turn prayer into a subtle form of self-exaltation. So I ask you to free me from any desire to impress, even before you. Let my prayers be simple, humble, and real. May I never use form to hide a lack of surrender. And as this request echoes within me, I begin to see that true humility is revealed when I recognize how deeply I depend on you in every detail of life. God, there is something deeply freeing in knowing that I do not need to complicate what can be simple before you. Prayer does not require elaborate vocabulary or long speeches. Many times, a few sincere words carry more faith than an abundance of phrases. Jesus himself taught in Matthew 6:7 that prayer is not about empty repetition, as if you were persuaded by many words. There are days when all I can say is, "Thank you, help me," or "Stay with me." And that is enough. These simple prayers are born out of dependence, not technique. When I give thanks for the day, for life, for provision, for rest, something begins to settle within me. A practical habit can change everything. Before going to sleep, quietly name a few things I am thankful for, without rushing, without formality. It is within this simplicity that faith reveals itself as alive and genuine. There is no performance, no embellishment, only truth. And the more I recognize that you respond to a sincere heart, the more I understand that simple prayer prepares the ground for intimacy that grows in silence and strengthens through consistency. Lord, there is something sacred about the moment when the day comes to an end and silence takes over. The bed, often seen only as a place of rest, can become a place of encounter with you. There, without distractions, without masks, without hurry, the heart opens more easily. Psalm 4:4 reminds me of this when it says to meditate within the heart, upon the bed, and be still. It is in this quietness that the soul begins to speak truthfully. There are nights when I lie down carrying thoughts, unresolved decisions, and concerns I could not fix during the day. Instead of resisting them, I can place everything in your hands right there. A simple practice transforms this moment, turning off screens a few minutes before sleep, breathing deeply, and laying the day before you, the struggles, the victories, and what still hurts. This kind of surrender changes the atmosphere of rest. In those moments, I realize that I do not need a visible altar to meet you. You are present wherever you are sought with sincerity. The bed becomes a place of trust, quiet gratitude, and honest prayer. And in this simplicity, something within me matures, preparing my heart to understand that even physical limitations are part of the journey of faith. Lord, there are seasons in life when the body no longer responds the way it once did. Tiredness comes faster, Pain appears without warning. Strength fades. And yet, the desire to speak with you remains alive. You know every limitation, every fragility, every night when the body needs rest, but the heart still wants to give thanks. Your word reminds me in Psalm 103:14 that you know how we are formed and remember that we are dust. There are people who can no longer kneel, others who struggle to stand, and some who spend long periods confined to a bed. Yet none of these prayers are smaller before you. Often, it is within limitation that faith becomes pure. When all that remains is a thought directed toward you, a silent sigh, or a tear on the pillow, you are there, hearing everything. So I place every limitation in your hands without shame, guilt, or comparison. Prayer does not lose value when the body weakens, it gains depth. And as I accept this truth, something realigns within me, preparing my heart to see that transformation continues even when prayer flows through the simplest moments of life. Lord, for a long time, I believed that I needed to pray the right way in order to be heard, as if there were a hidden formula, the exact combination of words, posture, and emotion that would unlock heaven. Without realizing it, this pursuit of a perfect prayer often pushed me away from you instead of drawing me closer. Yet Romans 8:26 reminds me that even when I do not know how to pray as I should, your Spirit intercedes for me. There were moments when I stayed silent because I did not feel spiritual enough, focused enough, or strong enough to pray. Today I see that this pressure never came from you. You never placed barriers where you had already placed grace. You never demanded perfection from your children, only availability. That truth gently dismantles a weight I carried for far too long. As this burden lifts, prayer becomes refuge instead of obligation. I can speak to you in the middle of confusion, doubt, and weakness. I can come just as I am. And as this freedom settles into my heart, I begin to recognize that my entire life, every ordinary moment, can become an ongoing conversation with you. Lord, when I begin to recognize your presence in the details of everyday life, everything changes. Prayer is no longer a single moment set apart. It flows through the entire day. It is present when I wake up, while I work, when I rest, and in the quiet of the night. Proverbs 3:6 teaches me to acknowledge you in all my ways. And as I do, my path is made straight. It is not about speaking constantly, but about walking aware that you are with me. Little by little, I learn to turn ordinary moments into conversation with you. Gratitude while washing my face in the morning, a silent request before a difficult decision, a breath of trust before falling asleep. These small practices create a living, accessible spirituality. They do not require perfect conditions, only attention and presence. This is how faith becomes woven into real life. As this awareness grows, I realize that prayer does not begin or end in a specific place. It moves, it accompanies me, it sustains me. And within this steady rhythm, something settles in my heart. A readiness to live each day with deep gratitude, conscious trust, and a life fully aligned with your presence. Now let me ask you, with honesty and care, what changes in your life when you realize that God is not waiting for a perfect posture, but for a willing heart? How many times have you stopped giving thanks, stopped talking to God, stopped resting in Him, because you felt you were not doing it the right way? Maybe today is the day to do something different, to turn your nights into moments of trust, to give thanks even when you are tired, to speak to God just as you are, right where you are. Because true gratitude is not born from strength. It is born from the awareness that God was with you the whole time, even when all you could do was pray quietly, lying down with a heavy heart. So let me leave you with these questions. If God heard you today, what will you do differently tomorrow? What attitude can you change right now, today, to live with more gratitude, more peace, and more trust? Will you continue carrying guilt that God never placed on you? Or will you finally rest in His presence? If this prayer spoke to your heart, do not let this moment end here. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so every day you can have a moment like this. A space for gratitude, heart alignment, and a sincere encounter with God. Here, prayer is not a ritual. It is a life lived in the presence of the Father,